So welcome everybody to this month's Culture Chat, the DLE Culture Chat. Today's topic is preparing for the path promotion, practical tips for moving up. My name is Kaled Rocha. I'm a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch Wealth Management in Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm glad we're still doing this virtually so I can still be part of this amazing network that started out in Western Mass and now is nationwide, even worldwide. We have some people from around the world, so it's great. So what the DLE is a business-oriented open forum that examines changes and challenges in today's workplaces, which is great. And today, in just 60 minutes, we aim to engage multiple perspectives through a moderated format that promotes a respectful conversation about vital topics with actionable takeaways. Designated for interactivity, the program unites accomplished professionals from various backgrounds, and you'll get to see that if you have your camera on and you see the whole list. Our goal is to help you grow what you know and who you know in a welcoming professional environment. We can do this with our amazing Culture Chat committee. I'm part of the committee in addition with Crystal Blake. She is an information technology manager at General Dynamics Mission Systems. Leah Merrow, she is a professional tennis player at Women's Association and a screenwriter in North Carolina. Sheryl Owen, she just actually started a new venture in her life, if you will. She just started her own small business, but she's based in New York City. Michelle Lopez, she is based in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. She's the executive director at Berkshire Immigrant Center. We got Greg Bluestein. He is a teacher and guidance counselor and varsity football coach, varsity football defensive coordinator, being more specific there, at Everett High School in Everett, Mass. So as you can see, we are based everywhere and we still come together as one, this great network. We have a diverse mix of frequent attendees and newcomers joining in from diverse regions, industries, and even countries. So welcome everyone to this awesome chat. This program is designed for learning and networking outcomes. So I'd like to ask you to type in the chat box your name, your company, your title, and your location where you're joining us from. So please use this chat box. A few ground rules that we have here. Thank you for the slide. And we use a chat box for comments and questions pertinent to the topic. Today's format, we usually have a different format, but today's format will be switching up to be more of a discussion. Usually we do breakout discussions in the smaller groups. Now we're gonna have an overall general group discussion because of today's topic is so great and we wanna hear everybody speak. So this will be a guided discussion and there'll be live polling in between discussion with open-ended questions that we will discuss. Now, I do encourage you guys to use the raise hand feature so I could be, I can see who wants to speak, and I'd be easy to call on you, or the chat box. You can use the chat box if you don't want to speak. We do the chat box pretty often. So, and great. Having said that, I want to introduce this topic and today's great. Let's just feature speaker, if you will. So today's topic is preparing for promotion, practical tips for moving up. So we have invited Jesse Noll to help us get the conversation going and add his invaluable perspective as someone who recently got promoted and now is managing a team that spans from coast to coast. He is currently an associate director on the content team at the New York City-based agency Wavemaker. Welcome, Jesse. We are pleased to air all of our perspectives as Culture Chat is a forum where we can openly discuss our experiences, perspectives, and thoughts. Jesse was recently featured on the DLE's Hub newsletter and shared 3 tips he implemented to achieve his promotion, 2.5 years in the making. So Jesse, thank you for joining us. Would you mind starting out and sharing a little of your background and the 3 tips that you shared earlier in the Hub, please?
Yeah, definitely. So, hey, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jesse Noll. I have been a longtime DLE member since 2016. I've attended the retreat a couple times, but then have been very active in the virtual community that we've built over the past 1.5 years with COVID. Coming out of college, I started working at a company called MEC, which over the past few years, we've rebranded to become Wavemaker. So I've been at the same job since I graduated from Syracuse University. And I have seen through my 5.5-ish years at the agency, some really amazing growth. Typically, it takes about 6 to 7 years to reach the associate director role, but in my case, it happened in about 5. And I think, as I've kind of gone through my career, there's really been 3 key components, but these 3 things have definitely been the most instrumental in kind of this most recent promotion. And they're listed in the Hub article, but to recap them, it's embracing challenges and taking on new responsibilities. A lot of what my team does is, very innovative work, and there's the need to kind of lean into discomfort in some cases. So taking on new challenges is always something that my senior leadership really, takes into consideration as promotions kind of come through the door. I've also spent a really good time at Wavemaker building a really amazing internal network. And over the past year, I've had direct access to my global head of content at the agency, as well as our new head of content in the US. So I have a really good working relationship with both of them, but I've also, been able to kind of access and have conversations with not only my US CEO, but my North American CEO, because Wavemaker is a global network that is spanning not only in the US, but globally. And then the third thing that really was helpful is really, before the promotion happened, really starting to kind of improve my own delegation and feedback skills. As I get more senior in my career, it's less about doing the day-to-day work and, building and growing a team of people who can really lean into the work and the roles of the job to bring success to our clients. Because at the end of the day, my clients' projects and campaigns are what really are our backbone, and we need to make sure that we're keeping them, at the forefront of content and technology, and really bringing best-in-class solutions to them.
Wow, Jesse, thank you for sharing those 3 great points. And if you want to take a look at the Hub article, I encourage everybody to go to the site. He says it clearly there as well, and I do appreciate those, Jesse. Thank you. And I want to focus on the first point though, and kind of go more in depth. And I think we're going to start with the poll question that we can address. So, in the past 6 months, has there been an instance where you've been challenged to work outside the context of your job description? So it speaks to Jesse's first point. Have you not? Just please take a quick minute to reply, and we'll get the results in about 10 seconds. If you want to count down with me. It's
10,
it's 9. Yeah, there you go, Jesse. Thank you.
Please don't.
Wow, look at this. Okay, this is great. And I'm curious to see like how many people. I know this past year has been really interesting and weird because of COVID, and we're all virtual, some not. I want to dive in deeper, Jesse. I mean, you mentioned like you took the initiative to ask for additional job responsibilities. Like, how do you start doing that? I want to hear from everybody else as well.
Yeah, so I think from my side, it was less about, just consistently raising my hand for new opportunities, but really showing that I had the skills to be able to do that. Over the past year, especially with working remotely, and just the shifts in kind of our agency and the world of advertising, we've seen that, content partnerships and media programs really are kind of driving the future of the industry, and not just your old traditional TV advertisements. So the importance of the work that my team does for our clients has grown in importance. With that came an influx of extra projects over the past year. So as my team kind of has grown, we, historically were a really lean team because the clients really weren't understanding the importance of content. But now that the pandemic has kind of accelerated that growth, it brought on extra opportunities. So outside of the work that I do on my day-to-day clients, I was pulled into projects to kind of dabble into new territories. So Last year, I worked on a partnership to bring together kind of a huge talent ambassador partnership with a really popular musician. And then, earlier this year, prior to my promotion, I was brought on to one of our pharmaceutical clients to kind of, rethink and help shift conversations around obesity and think about it in a different way than just your typical like ad spots. So obviously I can't share any information right now, but we're doing a really cool kind of first to market programming opportunity that's going to really help kind of shape culture. And the fact of the matter is I don't have the experience in that. It's not something that I have prior background in, but the willingness to kind of lean into the discomfort, the willingness to kind of take on and think about problem solving was really what was key to kind of the growth from a manager, which was my prior role, to an associate director. Because really, one of the things that I've noticed and something that my boss told me is that as you get more and more senior in your career, at least with the world of advertising, I don't know if this is applicable to everyone, you handle more and more projects with ambiguity. You have less of the details and you have to kind of figure it out. And so the proof of a good manager is, you don't cry about not having the details. You kind of sit there and strategically think about your approach to a problem and work it out.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. And I love when you said you had to lean into that discomfort. Like that's kind of the biggest thing. And people always say, or you always hear this from like business leaders, you only grow when you're uncomfortable. You have to lean in when you're in that situation where like, wow, okay, I'm uncomfortable. Why? Because you don't know how to do this. You don't know where it's going to lead to. But that uncomfortable, that is where you find your grit and you start creating yourself more and growing more.
And I think, and I think one of the things too is being okay with the potential for failure. I think it's very understood that, as you explore ambiguity and figure out problems that you don't have solutions for right off the bat, that you're not going to necessarily succeed with, shining colors. There's going to be kind of mistakes made. And the thing is, as long as you're not completely like tanking an organization with your mistakes, the chances of you getting fired are really low. And honestly, I think your managers will see the gall that you had to kind of really take an innovative approach, a provocative approach to a problem, and it may not have worked out to the way that you would have wanted it to, but you tried. And I think trying is just something that's really important.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Trying and learning from the failures, if you will, because if you just keep repeating them, that's when you grow into that murky waters of you might be let go, which we don't want. Now, does anybody else have a thought they want to share, especially from the nose? Actually, I want to hear why you haven't done anything out of sort of. I mean, it could have been circumstantial. Like again, this is a very respectful forum. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but Crystal, please, if you want to. Share.
Yeah, I'll jump in from the perspective of taking on additional responsibilities, taking that initiative, and just share one area that I've had success in is oftentimes in the corporate world, they're not willing to throw newer, younger employees in to run a big program right away, right? They're just that level of risk with having you take on something that big isn't something they're willing to take on. But they will have you lead a volunteer initiative or lead a small team to do something that may not be a big customer program, but gives you the opportunity to learn those project management skills, learn just how to work in that environment and get visibility that can then help lead to future promotions and future job responsibilities too. So that worked really well for me early on in my career, and I highly suggest it for folks who are just looking for ways to build some of those skills.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's interesting because again, that goes back to the same thing. You have to be uncomfortable. And I'm sure, Crystal, you probably were a little bit like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. Do you know how, like, I mean, I know I get like that when I get into new territory, and it's scary, but scary, it's good for the most part.
So Crystal, what kind of volunteer activities did you get involved in? And were they high profile for the company that you were representing the company outside, that you were sort of being looked at on how is she doing outside? Let's take it and think about how she can do that inside.
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind. I mean, one is Engineers Week. So being an engineering company, we do a week of volunteer projects. My first year, I took on hosting an event for Engineers Week. The second year, I was the co-lead for the entire week and coordinating multiple committees with multiple events. And that gets visibility within my company and a little bit outside as well. But I also ran the United Way campaign within my company for a couple of years, which has a lot of exposure to leadership, exposure to other, United Way connections and things like that. So it definitely helped to show. I mean, our campaign raises well over $100,000 each year. So it was a really big effort, and it showed that I could kind of take on and manage those things. So.
Great question, Linda. Thank you for following that up. That was great to hear from Crystal as well. So I see Sheryl has a hand up. I want to hear from Sheryl.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that point. Just because like I'm no longer in corporate, but when I always was like, I don't want to do non-promotional work, right? Like I've always just said, like, I'll volunteer my time as long as I understand how I can leverage it internally as well as externally. So I love that point, Linda, where you said, does the company find value in this? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to do non-promotional work. And then being able to understand, number two, like what can be leveraged outside, like is there exposure, is there brand enhancement for the company? And then being able to communicate that with your employee, with your supervisor is also key. So that was the only comment I wanted to make.
No, thank you, Sheryl. No, and as you were saying, I kept thinking about something. It's like, how do you know what the company values, right? Like, how do you know what they're looking for your promotion? And I just kept thinking, it's like, well, the advice I've always heard is like, look at the job you want. That's obviously a promotion from your current job, and look at the job duties. Does anybody have any experience with that want to share? How they use that as a framework to get more responsibilities and get those challenges so that you can actually develop or show those skills to your supervisors and managers? I don't know, Sheryl, if you did that hand open up now because from before, or okay, got it. I want to hear from like the younger people, maybe Connor or Kavya. And I know that you guys are right in the midst of this and trying to figure out how to enter a workplace pretty soon. And not to call you guys out, but if you guys want to say a few things.
Well, I did have a question, if that's okay.
Of course, please.
That's kind of directed at Jesse. So you said that the nature of your job has had because of the pandemic, it became more important, and you were noticing like an influx of tasks and responsibilities. I was wondering, so if someone is at a place at their work where they're not seeing that growth, but kind of would like to reposition themselves at a role that does have that growth and kind of that valued position, like how would they approach kind of getting that in their workplace, like kind of switching paths and within the same career? If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think something that Wavemaker does really well, and Wavemaker is part of a broader network called Group M, and then Group M is part of a larger holding company called WPP. So there's a lot of layers to the onion. I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed about working here is that if there is a desire to kind of change the trajectory of your career, there's a lot of mobility. I know, my people and culture HR team is really helpful in terms of kind of reinventing or kind of helping, employees find opportunities within the network, because ultimately the goal is to keep great talent within our company versus letting them go to a competitor. So if you're not finding the growth that you're looking for, or the type of kind of role that you're looking for within your current job description, there's always opportunities to kind of think about what the next path will be. And I think honestly, having a conversation with your manager, with your HR team, and kind of helping identify a solution that works best for you, because it could mean moving into a different role. It could also mean that maybe they just didn't realize that you were looking for some certain aspects of a career, change, and they can, grow that within the confines of your actual job. But yeah, no, Wavemaker is part of Group M, Sheryl. The large onion holding company of holding companies.
Jesse, I like when you said that, bring up your disaster manager, and actually gives us a great segue into our second point here of building your internal networks across your organization, whether it's you have many layers like Group M does, or just one layer. But I want to pull up next poll, please. And in this poll, we want to rate your success in internal networking. How good are you? Excellent, good, fair, or poor? And please be honest. We're here to learn, and honesty is key. And it helps you grow. Get uncomfortable with being comfortable. Backwards, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Excuse me. That'll come up in probably 10 seconds. We could do a countdown again. No, I love what you say, Jesse. It's great, and the question Kevin just asked was great. So great. Look at this. Okay, so we have kind of the usual bell curve. I like that, but it's kind of skewed more to the excellent side. So I wonder what these are. This is a question for everybody. And Jesse, if you want to answer it first, please be my guest. But what are some of the strategies that you have used in the work internally? I know you shared already. You talked to the U.S. head, the North American head. Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
In terms of adding on, I think the biggest thing for me really was, reaching out to people. I think just having conversations, and I think my team just naturally does a good job of this, of staying kind of on top of all the tasks, having regular connects. But I would encourage people to just have conversations with management, with your team, with other stakeholders that you work with, from whether that's your clients or other teams that you might work with. For me, I work regularly with other agencies, so just having that conversation and putting yourself out there, I think, is really important. And then I think with regard to a promotion, the thing that's really been instrumental for me is that I've advocated for myself. Obviously my skills are known and seen, but I've raised my hand every time that I've felt that I personally was ready for upward movement in my career. I think, there's this mindset of good things come to those who wait, which is very true, but also great things come to those who advocate. So really having the opportunity to have a conversation with your boss and say, hey, I really think that I'm ready for the next step in my career. Would love to have a conversation about this, and really think about, if you personally don't think that I'm ready, what is the game plan to get me from point A to point B, is something that's really valuable, because I think it helps accelerate the growth as well. Because when I had initially started the conversation about getting promoted, the estimate I was getting from my bosses was late fall, so next month probably. And because I had the conversation and started working toward it, and really kind of making sure that I was really focusing in on the things that they thought would be the biggest proponents for the promotion, it happened in July.
No, and that makes sense, and that's great. And I see Linda posted a great question out there, but I want to hold off real quick because that's the next question I want to ask in our poll. But I do want to ask you a follow up with something. As far as reaching out to people, obviously it's uncomfortable to ask that, but I like how you said it was very open ended. I'm ready for my next step of my career. Like, can we talk about this? As opposed to being like, I want to get promoted. Yes and no. It's very, combative that way.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that was your experience. And with my experience, like at work, it's been the same thing. Opening the questions go a long, long way. But what you said, good things come to those who wait. Great things comes to those who advocate. I'm gonna memorize that for now. Like, it's awesome. In anything you do, whether you're a business developer, whether you're trying to grow internally, or whatever you do, I think it's great. But does anybody have any thoughts around that? Like, what are some of the strategies you use, or what are some of the struggles that you have with internal networking, whether it's who do I talk to or who do I reach out to? Like, what are your thoughts around this? I want to learn from everybody. Raise your hand feature is awesome. It's available. Or you just put it in your screen. I could probably see you on the screen, or just unmute yourself and start speaking. Sheryl, if you want to start, and then go to Katie, please.
I think for me, it's always like, I'm young, I don't want to approach management. Like, just that resistance to maybe sounding crazy, or like, who's this crazy person trying to talk to me? Like, that's kind of like what's going on in like my head. But in reality, it probably isn't the case. They probably are friendly, right? Maybe that's what you experienced, Jesse. But like, how do you go through, jump over that hurdle as probably a young professional in corporate, trying to approach management and people in leadership to let them know, like, hey, this is who I am and this is what I bring to the table?
So I'm going to clue everyone in on a little secret. I might look older than I appear, but I'm only 26 years old. And normally I don't tell my age to people, because then people are like, what? You're only 26 years old? Because apparently I look older. It is crazy for a 26-year-old to say, hey, can I be an associate director? Like, it's crazy even for people my age to have been a manager. But I think it's I think this is a testament to the people that I work with, to be completely honest. But a lot of my senior leadership does not believe that, the number of years of experience equates to your skill sets. Your age does not equate to your skill sets. Like, on the flip side, I could, have told you that I was 50 years old and was working towards that role, and there would be no difference. I think the thing that really is emphasized, and I think should take precedent, is your readiness for the role, not how many years you've been in the role. And I know that a lot of industries like rigidly do say like, oh, you can only be promoted after you've been in a position for like 3 or 4 years. And technically my agency also has those kind of timing restrictions. Like, I should have been in the manager role for closer to 3 years, but I was only more like 2.5. But when you have a good network above you who is there to advocate for you and be your cheerleader, and knows the work that you can do, they're willing to have those conversations. And it's not crazy to ask. There's nothing wrong with asking. I mean, I think it actually unleashes and kind of helps you unlock, the values of the company. I'm grateful to have a team and an agency that is very supportive and looking to help grow their employees regardless of the timeline. But if you have an employer who, completely scoffs at the prospect of promoting you versus hearing you out or having a discussion about it,
Yeah,
you might want to do some thinking.
yeah. Well, Jesse, you look great for 50 years old. No, this is great question, Sheryl, and Jesse, great response. Like, this is awesome. But I want to hear from Katie. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of have it as to do like a student side of it to make it a little bit more complicated. Because I have like a relationship with my teacher, but then if you go even higher than that, more of like every class has a dean. And at Fordham, each year your dean changes. I know some schools like your dean goes with you, but for me, it changes each year. And so I know Linda asked the question in the group chat, and Kaled, you said you'd get to it more about like remote learning, like being online and creating a connection. I feel like it's been so much harder. And for a dean being one of like 1,200 students, it's really hard for me to like stand out. And I'm sure that's the same in, an employer and in a business environment. And so I feel like just the struggle of trying to stand out and get yourself out there, especially remotely, I feel like it's been a challenge.
And that's a very fair point, Katie. I mean, standing out and it's hard. And for me, I found it to be more consistency. Just keep trying and keep trying, and that's the answer you always get from many people. But you kind of have to believe in yourself to a certain point. But and that actually will lead on to the next point too. But I want to talk to Austin first, and then we'll dive deeper into what Katie said and what Linda asked earlier. But Austin, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I was gonna say I kind of use being young to my advantage, because I am young and vulnerable, and I don't really know much about how things operate and this and that, and I hold no formal management or leader position or anything. Now I'm an individual contributor. I use my inexperience to my advantage because I'll say, I'm not sure if this is how it's normally done or if this is the correct way to do it, but here's what I'm thinking. And that's usually taken really well because they understand that I'm not trying to direct them in a certain way or something, and I'm not trying to push anything because I really don't know the answer. And they'll often then listen to what I have to say. And sometimes they like what I have to say. Sometimes they're like, no, we've tried that before and we know it doesn't work, so this is actually what we do. And then so it can turn into a learning experience. So I try to learn and put myself out there as much as I can because I am young.
But that's great because like when you're on and two, you're motivated, and three, you're encouraged to learn more. And I think they see that drive behind you, driving you forward in your career. And I think to Katie's point, that's you stand out. You have to just be consistent with that and have the curiosity to keep learning. I mean, in my role as an advisor, I get notes a lot from many prospects going like, no, I don't need an advisor, and just have to keep that consistency, keep that positivity up, and the curiosity. And like, I'm young, I look younger than what I am. I'm 32 years old, but I look like I'm 27. And many people always ask me, oh, well, like, you look young, like, are you inexperienced? And okay, I got the experience on my side, but my response is always I'm gonna grow with your account. This is a relationship for life, and I have 30 years in my career left over, so you will always be with me. Well, that's the hope, at least. And so I like what you said, Austin. You use it to your advantage, your age to your advantage, your inexperience to your advantage to grow. So, and I want to move on to the next point because I think it's been coming up a lot with the remote work. How do you stand out? So let's pull up the next poll, please. Has working remotely made it more difficult to expand your internal network? Yes or no? All right. No, this is a great conversation. I'm getting like many ideas, and like I could talk about this forever with you guys for sure. And I know it's already 12:30 and we can move forward, but this is great. So thank you all for sharing and so far. All right, let's see what the poll says. Wow, 50-50. I had a feeling it was going to be like this, but I didn't expect it to be. This is interesting, and actually I was the person that answered yes myself, because internal networking it's hard when you're not in the office, and many friendships and relationships are made in the office when you're physically in the office. So what are some of the techniques that you have tried to do, for example, like I try to have like a standing call with my team every week or every 2 weeks. Are there any other things that like people have done so far to connect with their internal network and to try to stand out, like Katie asked earlier and like Austin said, like how do you all do that? Is that Austin again? Want to go again, or is that your hand from before?
Yeah, no, that's my hand from before. I don't know why it's still up.
Well,
I don't know how to make it go down. And I actually go into work pretty frequently because of the nature of my work. So I don't really have much to say about this one.
But I want to hear you though. Like, have you been able to build a network though more, you think, being into the office?
Oh, it's so easy to talk to people when you're in the office, because especially the facility I'm in, it's like a testing facility. So there's no cubicles or anything. It's just kind of desks and chairs. So, I mean, I can just turn right around and say, oh, hey, so-and-so, what are you thinking here or that? And then do it, oh, go talk to this person. I just get up, go talk to that person. So it's really easy just to talk to who I need to, when I need to, and getting that face-to-face interaction. I mean, because now we recognize each other. So when walking past in the hallway, I can be like, oh yeah, I remember I need to tell you whatever. So
Right.
I
And
mean,
that makes a lot of
it's really
sense.
nice being in the office.
Yeah, I know, I bet. It's tough to find people and call them all the time. But and the more the internal network you create, what if those people move on to different companies that they want to bring you over to? So like your network will always grow internally and externally. So that's great. Does anybody want to add to that or share your own perspective?
I can jump in real quick.
Sure.
So I actually, even though like my Hub article talks about internal networking, I actually did answer yes to this poll question, that it is harder, because it is. You know, you're not walking past people in the office saying like, hey, how's it going? Building that relationship as easily as before. The thing that I've found to be useful is the relationships that I have built remotely have unlocked connections to other people through proxy. I feel like because I've, you know, made myself known to like my global head of content and my US head of content, I get put in contact with people that I wouldn't even probably be put in contact with if I was in the office. Like a prime example, obviously like we're a global organization, but I typically just work purely in the US. And yesterday I got looped into an email thread introduced to someone who works on the content team over in France. So I'm meeting people in other markets and getting to connect with them who I would never, you know, have the opportunity to connect with. And yes, it's harder, but I think the people that you do reach out to, the more and more you keep in contact with them, they'll think about you as other emails from their end come through, that if they think that you're a fit for an opportunity or want to loop you into a conversation, then they'll advocate for you.
I like that. I like that. And it goes back to the same theme of like, it might be uncomfortable picking up the phone or connecting with people, but you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order to grow and grow that network. And just call them or just send them an email saying, can we connect? I have a question. I want to learn about your job or something.
Yeah. And I think, you know, thinking of your network more as a branching spider web versus like just a circle of people around you is something to keep in mind. I mean, even LinkedIn kind of shows like, oh, you have a firsthand connection with this person or a secondhand connection if you like are, you know, connected to someone they're connected with. So like, I think thinking about that is probably something that's also good to know as well.
Yeah. No, and you know, I'll share one tip with that, because with my job, I have to create my own network to get business. And like, you know, sometimes when I'm nervous about calling somebody or something, I look in the mirror and I hype myself up. You know, I try to, I don't know if you guys have seen Wolf of Wall Street at the very beginning when Matthew McConaughey goes like this and pounds his chest to get himself pumped up, or I look in the mirror and I smile and I'll be like, Kaled, you got this. And it's the cheesiest thing ever. And you might feel so uncomfortable doing that, or you smile while you're on the phone. But it really helps, like your attitude and your emotions do translate and transmit over a phone call, over an email. And I think people feel that inherently in some certain way, no matter if you're virtual or not. Virtual is harder, definitely, but if you have that attitude, I'm sure it's happened to me, it does transfer over. So, and I think it gets me into a nice segue to the next point, because when you're networking more, you're spending more time on trying to build that network, on meeting new people. So inherently, you have to delegate your current tasks to people, so then you could have more time to do this internal networking or taking on new tasks. So I want to bring up the next poll, please, and it's more open-ended. Actually, it's actually, I'm just going to ask if it's open-ended. Excuse me. So, what is the hardest aspect of delegation that you experience? You know, what holds you back from delegating to somebody else? And you know, which is tough. I mean, it's kind of like, I'm gonna start this because for me, delegation, I have to do everything, and it goes slower, and like I know Jesse has a lot to say about this too, and it's hard. I mean, Jesse, like, why do you fuss around that? Like, how do you delegate, or how did you delegate to get more time to get promoted?
So I'm trying to think of the best way to enter this, because this is a very loaded topic of delegation, and I think it's a very personal journey for everyone. For me, delegation is important because you can't do everything, especially if you are in a team-centric role. Like I said, my team has been growing consistently over the past year, which is great. Along with it has come a team. Historically, I was often operating as a one-man show on the projects that I was overseeing, where I was basically having every conversation with the clients, with the partners that we worked with, making sure that everything was moving efficiently. I got really, really used to that, but then our team started to grow. I had people to reporting into me that needed work to do. I needed to kind of give them tasks. And so I had a kind of realization one day, and I talked with my boss about it one day, because you would think, oh, having a team is great, but really it kind of rattled me a little bit, because I was like, I've never had to manage people before, because I just haven't had a team underneath me. I've just been operating as a one-person show. And I think giving other people the opportunity to do work and to be a contributing member of the team helps obviously grow them. It also allows you to think bigger picture, especially as you get more senior in your career. You start to have to worry about and think about things like strategy and client relationship a little bit more than the day-to-day tasks at hand of a project. And so you want to kind of manage your time effectively. So you want to manage your team's time effectively. So you want to start delegating. And I think the biggest thing for me was, having a conversation with my boss. She made it very clear that it's like, when you start delegating to people, there's two things you need to keep in mind. A, they're probably not going to do it the same way that you would have done it. And B, they're going to potentially take longer at first to do it. And you can't use, well, I can do it quicker as an excuse. Yes, you can, but then what else are you kind of leaving behind? Or you're going to be up all night doing work, which obviously that's not what any of us should be doing. Secondarily, it's allowing people to have the creativity to think about problems themselves, because that inherently allows them to grow as well. And yes, they might not do it the way that you would do it, but if they get to the same end solution, or potentially something even better than what you would have thought of, that's a great thing.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, Sheryl, this is a great question that you just put on the chat, because I was thinking about this as Jesse was saying it. As you delegate, you're gonna have to give feedback to people on how they're doing their job. And I love that you asked this question, like, which is more difficult, like giving constructive feedback or receiving constructive feedback, and why? It's tough, because you have to. I mean, like my first thoughts there, I would think you have to figure out how that person, if you're giving constructive feedback, how that person wants to hear it. And Michelle, like you said, giving, I want to hear from you. Why is giving harder than receiving it?
I think for the reason you just stated, everybody receives feedback differently. And I think the best practice when I was younger and receiving the feedback was like, okay, the supervisor is gonna tell me what I'm doing well, and then tell me what needs to improve, and then pat me on the back again. And it's the sandwich of good, bad, good, which I don't think is best practice anymore. So I think it's learning about the different personalities and work ethics / personality of the people you're supervising. And I just feel like I'm really good at receiving feedback because I don't take things personally, but I supervise people on all ends of the spectrum. Some take things personally and some don't. So it's always hard, and I have to do a lot of prep work when I'm giving, you know, feedback. So I think it's difficult to give rather than receive.
Yeah, because I think receiving, you know your own reaction, you can control your own reaction. Whereas when you give it, you have no idea how the opposite party is going to react or respond to you, which it is scary. It's like you don't. I mean, I'm a very direct person. I do try to be aware of how somebody receives things, but I could say the kindest way possible, and they might take it the wrong way because they heard only the one word that was negative, or which is fair. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just people receive it differently, and it's tough. It's really hard, but that's part of delegation.
I think medium, and by the way, the medium in which you're giving feedback matters greatly. So, you know, the communication mode of giving feedback that's constructive through a text or a chat is diluting real positive impact. And even if it's a tough message, you being able to verbally walk somebody through your comments is so much more powerful. And yet, when it is difficult feedback that I regularly see people giving, it's not being able to look in the eye. We've now been given the pass if we can just chat it or email or text it. And I just encourage people, as hard as it is to have that message, particularly a difficult conversation, the verbal exchange will make that message much more palatable than a written exchange.
I think the other thing too is, and I asked this question in the chat, but I think giving feedback becomes easier the more often you do it. I am in the mindset that you should always be giving ongoing feedback versus like setting up a formal time of like, you know, every week we have a one-on-one, and that's the only venue where I say, this is what you're doing really well, this is what you can work on. Obviously, like, I'm not going to read every email that my team sends through and is like, you could have done this better, because simple things like that aren't things that you need to harp on, and it ebbs and flows. But I think I've gotten into the practice of, you know, having more regular discussions with my team as we go through projects of like, that was a really, you know, great response you had, that was a great recommendation that you put forward. Conversely, you know, that recommendation could have been better. I think you could have been a little bit clearer with communicating to the client or to the partner, you know, things like that. Because it is very hard to give feedback, but I think especially as you do it more often, you get comfortable and understand the ways that your team receives feedback and how they like to receive it. And it ultimately makes it better. Obviously, that doesn't help in the beginning when you're just like scared totally to do it. But again, you gotta step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. No, and I love what you said. Like, how often do you give your team feedback, Jesse? It's like a great question in the chat you asked, and then Katie, you know, your professor should know to be proud. Like, the medium is the message. I mean, Michelle said it perfectly. Like, you want to sit neutral space or in their office, so then they're more in a you give them more of the power dynamic, if you will, to give them the space and comfort. I think, as opposed to having them into your office, if that's possible. If it's not possible, then that's, you know.
Yeah.
It's
tough. I think, you know, the process of giving feedback is terrifying because you're worried about the reaction of the person that's being told the feedback. And so the more often that you practice with them and talk with them, you know, the less surprising the feedback ends up being. You know, like my agency, we formally do performance reviews once a year. Obviously, you know, my team and a lot of people at the agency give feedback regularly. But when I get around to a performance review, nothing that my bosses include is surprising to me. Like and in our performance reviews, we actually, part of it is we have to give ourselves a self-assessment. And for the past few years, my self-assessment has mirrored pretty closely to the things that my managers are asking or providing for me.
I like that. Yeah, because then it's like, you know, one for one. And what Crystal said is true. Like, actual behavior, it's that you give the feedback often more effective and understandable than feedback can be. It's a lot of that, non-verbal communication you're giving as well. So this is great. I know it's already 12:51, so I kind of want to do a quick recap of what we had talked about with Jesse and with everybody I've shared before we pass it out to Linda to close it off. And this has been a great chat. It's been in my head for a while, and especially now with the reopening going on. Some places slower than others or faster than others, if you will, and people are kind of just getting feedback on how to move up in a company or how to, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person or in a hybrid model. I really do appreciate what Jesse shared, the 3 things he did to get promoted. He embraced the challenge by taking on new responsibilities. He built the internal, the internal network across your organization, and you improved your delegation to give you more time to do those first 2 things, which is huge. And and managing your own time, because the only thing you can really manage is yourself in the scope of time and things like that. So I really wanted to thank you all. And Jesse, if you want to add one last point, actually, I wanted to ask you one last thing, because the higher you go up in a organization, the less you will know what's happening on the boots on the ground. That's part of delegation. That's part of also getting and receiving feedback. How does that ambiguity become more prevalent, and how do you deal with it as you go up in a career?
So I think, to kind of close this out, you get more ambiguity the more senior you get. And one of the things that my boss mentioned to me well before I was ready for promotion, like this was like pre-pandemic actually, she made it very clear to me that like the makings of a good manager, a good leader, is that you handle ambiguity professionally. You can't, if you're thrown something that you don't know the answer to, you can't just like flail around and complain and freak out because you don't know the answers. You need to calmly kind of sit with it, sit with the discomfort, think about it, and then act. And I think part of the reason, things like delegation and taking on new responsibilities is important is because the more new responsibilities you take on, the less ambiguous things can be, because you'll have experiences to draw upon when you reach, instances where you might not know the answer right away. But then also delegating allows you that time for reflection. Because, and I think that's a huge thing with delegation is like, if you didn't delegate and you just did it all yourself, you wouldn't have time to think. You'd reach a point where you just kind of become this, autopilot robot doing all the work, not actually critically thinking about things. And yes, things would get done, but could they be done better? Could they have, been thought through a little bit more? So it allows you to kind of think about that more strategically. I think ambiguity and really the discomfort with ambiguity I'm thinking about is really important, because that means you're growing, you're learning, and it might suck at first, but once you kind of learn to embrace the ambiguity, to embrace the discomfort and the understanding that you're not going to know everything, that's where room for growth happens. My boss I was actually talking about it with my boss the other day. Something that she really, loves about her role is the fact that, she's constantly learning, and it's okay to learn. I don't think we should penalize people for not knowing the answers. It's really, understanding, do you know how to think about the problem and think about solutions?